Hi guys, this is Merc and today we are looking at 10 unsolved mysteries of Australia. This video was recommended by Mike Davids. Thank you for the suggestion, man. I hope you will enjoy this video. But before we begin, I would just like to say that my pronunciation is absolutely garbage, so I might mispronounce some of these names and words. With that being said, let's begin with the video. Number 1. Luna Park Ghost Train Fire. Jenny and John Godson lived in the central western town of Warren and had finally decided to bring their two young kids, Damien and Craig, to the Big Smoke for a much anticipated visit to Taronga Zoo and Luna Park. They visited the zoo and returned to the city for dinner before heading to Luna Park for a night of rides, which should have been the highlight of the holiday for the two young boys. At the end of the night, the family had to make a final decision before leaving for home. Which ride would they spend their final tickets on? The boys decided on the ghost train and headed off to the ride with their father, while Jenny went off on a short detour for an ice cream. When Jenny made her way back to the ghost train, she was met with a terrifying sight of smoke pouring out of the ride her entire family had just entered. Attendants were desperately trying to get people off the train as it came out of the tunnels. Jenny's husband and two boys, along with 4 other passengers, didn't make it out. Some time after the tragedy, Jenny came across some of the photographs taken during the horrible day and stopped to stare at one in particular. A picture of her son Damien, the last one ever taken, shows the little boy shyly posing next to an intimidating figure wearing a demonic-looking mask with horns on his head. They were unable to locate the man later. After the fact, comparisons were made between the figure and the god Moloch, who doesn't seem to skip Ab's Day. It is believed that Moloch preferred children to be burned alive as sacrifices. Was this a sinister way to offer human sacrifices to an ancient god? Or was it a deliberate arson in the business dispute as some others have claimed? The mystery of exactly who the horned masked man was remains. Number 2. Rockman. On 11th August 1994, fisherman Mark Peterson set out on his boat and moved slowly up the Hawkesbury River just north of Sydney. It was a lovely day, and Mark became excited as he felt a heavy tug on his fishing net. It was sure to be a good haul of a fish, but when he drew his net from the water, it contained a heavy piece of steel fashioned into a crucifix. Tied to it was the remains of a human body. Shocked, Peterson immediately called the police, who examined the remains. A forensic pathologist noted that the remains were of a male between 21 and 41, and the bones were anatomically arranged on the crucifix. The victim's entire body and head were wrapped in plastic. In addition to plastic, there was wire wrapped around the head and torso. The man has yet to be identified, partially because his fingerprints had literally been eroded by the water. He was given the nickname the Rockman. Police are still working on several leads, including one from public that stated that the Rockman may be Joe Biviano, a drug dealer who had gone missing from Drummond in 1993. They are still hoping to match the DNA. The remains of Rockman are still lying in the morgue. Number 3. Wailing at Wilga Waterhole. In 1941, an employee of Ruthven Station in Queensland decided to build a hut for himself and his wife to live in. The hut stood on the banks of Wilga Waterhole close to the station. His wife had no qualms about being at the hut alone while he worked, but he came home one night to find her in hysterics. Trying to figure out what had scared his wife so much, the station employee could only get out of her that she had heard paralyzing, terrifying screams and wailing emanating from the waterhole. The man believed his wife had been scared by screams of a bird, and he wasn't worried at all. He didn't think anything of it at that time, until a few weeks later when he had to be away on business for 2 days and nights. His wife was again hysterical, even worse than the previous time, and adamant that she heard wailing and screaming rising from the waterhole. Thoroughly spooked now by the state of his always level-headed wife, the man took her away from the hut and never returned there. When he left, he warned some of his colleagues about the creepiness of the waterhole. His colleagues were skeptical, and a couple of them decided to camp out next to the waterhole overnight. They stayed awake until after midnight, the only scare coming when an old bull bellowed and startled them. The men laughed at themselves, and one by one fell asleep next to the dying campfire. However, it wasn't long before they were woken rudely from their dreams by a deafening wailing increasing in volume with each shriek. The horrible sound was emanating from the waterhole. The men threw their things together and hightailed it out of there. Stories are rampant that the wailing could be from the ghost of a boy killed by the wild pigs whose body was found at the waterhole many years ago. Another tale states that a shepherd was murdered in the area and his body thrown into the waterhole. Skeptics believe that the shrieking is from a local species of owl. There have been some investigation, but the cause of the wailing at the Wilga waterhole remains unexplained. Number 4. Pajama Girl Murder. In 1934, a farmer was leading a prize bull home on a road about 7 kilometers out of Albury when he saw something shoved inside a storm water pipe. Upon inspection, he discovered it was a body of a young woman who appeared to have been beaten, burned and shot. She was wearing yellow pajamas and had a towel wrapped around her head. He immediately called the police. Having been burned, the pajama girl was very difficult to identify. The pajamas, towel, sack and dental records led nowhere. They preserved her body in a bath of formalin and put on display at Sydney University. And over the years, thousands of people came to view her. Enormous photographs were put on display at the Albury show, and some groundbreaking work in the area of forensic facial reconstruction was done. This photo is of the painted plaster facial reconstruction of Pajama Girl, modeled by the New South Wales policeman Cecil Jardine. It took 10 years for them to identify the woman as the Linda Agostini. Shortly after the announcement, Linda's husband confessed to her murder and pleaded self-defense. He claimed that he woke one morning to a gun being held to his head by Linda, and in the struggle she was shot and killed. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, it seems that the woman in the yellow pajamas and Linda Agostini may have been two different people. A book written by Richard Even claims that the murder victims did not have the same eye color, breast size, or nose shape. A play called The Pajama Girl was later made based on these same claims. Number 5. Tynong North Serial Killings. On 6 December 1980, a man dumping animal remains in Tynong North came across something that looked to him to be human bones. He immediately notified local police, who then proceeded to uncover the remains of 3 women. 2 years later, the remains of 4th victim was found in the same area. One of the victims, 14-year-old Catherine Linda Headland, disappeared from an outer Melbourne bus stop on August 28, 1980. Early investigation into Catherine's disappearance was muddled with false sightings, including friends claiming to see her and an unidentified blonde woman in Narre Warren around 2:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared, but the police treated this as unreliable. The other victims were Anne-Marie Sargent, 18 years old, and Bertha Miller, who was 73-year-old, who had been abducted 18 days before. 3 more bodies were later discovered nearby, along the other side of the same stretch of road in Frankston North, but are considered by the Bureau of Criminal Investigation to have been perpetrated by a different killer. Despite naming suspects over the years and linking the serial killings of 2 more murders committed in Frankston, police have been unable to solve either set of crimes. Even after rounds and rounds of interviews, police don't even know whether the murders were committed by several people or by a lone killer. Number 6. Disappearance of Rihanna Barrow. 12-year-old Rihanna Barrow planned to walk to local mall in South Australia in October 1992 to buy a Christmas card for her American pen pal. She normally would have taken the bus, but the bus drivers were on a strike that day and Rihanna didn't want to wait. Her mother agreed that she could go to the mall, said goodbye to her daughter and headed off to work. Rihanna was seen walking away from her home at 10:30 am and later seen at 12:30 pm at what was then Morfettville High School. This would be the last time anyone saw her. When her mother arrived home at 4:10 pm, the door was locked, the TV was on, and a record was on the living room floor, as though Rihanna had been playing it. The Christmas card was on the table. The scene seemed to indicate that someone came to the house, and Rihanna either left in a rush or was not expecting to leave the house at all. Her personal belongings were not taken. Rihanna was never seen again, and to this day, no one knows what happened to her. Police believe that Rihanna was murdered shortly after she was taken. There is a reward up to $1 million for information leading to the apprehension of the killer or the location of Rihanna's remains. Number 7. Marree Man. The Marree Man was discovered in July of 1998 by a pilot that was flying over the plateau on which the geoglyph is located. However, the tremendous work of art was largely ignored until a local hotel owner received an anonymous fax regarding the Marree Man. The hotel owner told the local newspaper about it, and the story ran on 15 July 1998. It was then that the public realized that there was a giant-sized and mysterious geoglyph less than 3 miles outside of town of Marree. The Marree Man depicts a standing Aboriginal hunter with some sort of spear or possibly a boomerang in his hand. The man is roughly 4 kilometers tall and is nude. Some experts believe that it is remarkably accurate in its depiction of an Aboriginal hunter. Experts believe that the Marree Man was completed shortly before it was discovered, yet nobody even noticed that it was being made. There must have been some heavy equipment there and more than one person, yet no one has a clue that someone was working on a huge project out there. In fact, since that time, no one has even come forward and admitted to making it. This is very surprising because whoever did it did not commit a crime. They have no apparent reason to hide their identity, apart from wanting to tease the rest of us. Conspiracy theorists suggest that Marree Man might have been created by military or by UFOs. Today, the Marree Man is slowly fading, but it is still clearly visible from a plane. There are some plane tours that will take you over it, however, it will eventually erode away. The mystery remains as to who the creator of Marree Man was and what the purpose of the massive drawing was supposed to be. Number 8. Mr. Cruel. It was 1991. Carmen was babysitting for her 2 younger sisters, Carly and Karen. Their parents were working at family's Chinese restaurant just 10 minutes away. All 3 girls were watching a documentary about Marilyn Monroe in Carmen's bedroom. Around 9 pm, the 2 younger sisters went to the kitchen. In the hallway, they found a man in a balaclava carrying a large knife. He grabbed both girls by the hair, forcing Carmen's younger sisters into a cupboard and barring the door with a bed. By the time Carly and Karen pushed their way out, there was no sign of Carmen. Police dogs traced Carmen's scent through the house past the family's Toyota Camry, outside which had been spray painted with the words "Payback" and "More to come." The trail led police to a vacant block 300 meters away. From there, everything was speculative. In 1992, a year after teenager disappeared, Carmen's body was found. She had been shot 3 times in the head. Police believed that Carmen was abducted by Mr. Cruel, which was the media's nickname for an unknown person responsible for a dozen attacks on Victorian children during the 1980s and 90s. All his victims were young girls. He broke into houses, assaulted other family members, and then left his victims alive after sexually assaulting them. On top of this, he removed all evidence, even hand-washing victims. In one case, he left a victim dressed in a garbage bag so that no DNA evidence could be recovered from her clothes. In another case, he took clothes from victim's house so she could be dressed in different clothing when found by the police. Police believe that the man may have worked for the education system because of the way his attacks happened during school holidays. Only 2 of Mr. Cruel's victims have been formally identified. There was 10-year-old Sharon Wells, who was released after 18 hours, dumped at a school in Bayswater, dressed in plastic bags. Then in 1990, 13-year-old Nicola Linus, who went to Presbyterian Ladies College, like Carmen's, was abducted from her home in Canterbury and held for 50 hours. Neither of them ever saw his face. It's speculated that Carmen may have been killed because she pulled off his mask or recognized him. After a long-running investigation, police said they have checked more than 10,000 public tip-offs, searched 30,000 homes and interviewed 27,000 people over the case, but they were unable to catch Mr. Cruel. The complete lack of DNA or any other forensic evidence has ensured that the identity of Mr. Cruel remains a mystery. Number 9. Disappearance of Azaria Chamberlain. On 17th August 1980, the Chamberlain family went to camping at Uluru or Ayers Rock. This turned into a camping trip from hell when 9 weeks old baby Azaria disappeared from the tent. Mother Lindy claimed that a dingo had dragged the baby away, but authorities did not believe her, and after 2 years of court cases, convicted her of life imprisonment for the murder of her daughter. Father Michael was convicted for being an accessory to murder. However, new evidence emerged on 2nd February 1986, when a remaining item of Azaria's clothing was found partially buried near Uluru, in an isolated location adjacent to Dingo Lair. This was the matinee jacket which the police had maintained for years did not exist. 5 days later, the Chamberlains were released from jail. All sorts of wild theories had developed around this case, including the baby have been sacrificed in a religious ritual. In July 2004, an elderly Melbourne man claimed he knew what had happened that fateful night. 78-year-old Frank Cole told reporters that he and 3 mates were camping at Uluru in 1980 when he went out with his rifle to shoot some food for his dog. Around dusk, he thought he saw a rabbit in the bush and shot it, only to find he had shot a dingo that had a baby in his mouth. He then took the baby, which had several puncture wounds to her head and an ear missing, back to his mates, as the guys had broken several laws. Having a gun in the park and having shot a dingo, they decided that the 2 would drive back to Melbourne with the gun and the other 2 would talk to the police and tell them they hit a dingo on the road and discovered the baby in his mouth. The 2, however, never did talk to the police, and as time went on, all the men died one by one. This left Frank Cole as the sole survivor, who now wanted to tell his story before he would die too. He thought one of the other men might have buried the baby in his backyard in Melbourne. The current owner of the house was driven nuts by journalists banging on his door, and another possible house yard where the body could not be dug up as the site was now occupied by large block of units. The policeman that was on the duty on that fateful night said there were few holes in Frank's story. Lindy's lawyer at the time seemed to believe him, but the Lindy herself did not. The plot thickened even more when it was reported on the TV show A Current Affair in July 2004 that Azaria could be still alive, and Lindy was investigating a claim that a fair-skinned woman in her 20s was living with Aborigines in the central Australian desert. And sure enough, in August 2005, a 25-year-old Alice Springs woman, Erin Horsburgh, contacted her local newspaper, the Centralian Advocate, with the message that she was Azaria Chamberlain. She claimed that she was found by an Aboriginal man, passed to an Aboriginal woman, and then handed to a white woman. Also, she says her skin bears dingo teeth marks, and she has frequent dingo nightmares and a family resemblance. However, her claims were rejected by the authorities and the ABC's Media Watch program, who stated that none of the reports linking Horsburgh to the Chamberlain case had any substance. It was reported in the media that Erin wanted money for her story. However, she was later invited to tell her story, but they never heard from her again. The cause of Azaria's disappearance has not been officially determined. Number 10. The Lonergans. Americans Eileen and Tom Lonergan went diving on 25th January 1998 at St. Crispin's Reef, a popular dive site on the Great Barrier Reef, 25 miles off the coast of Queensland near Port Douglas. The Lonergans from Louisiana had gone with the Port Douglas-based scuba boat Outer Edge. Stories vary, but at the end of the day, the crew did a head count and came up with only 24 of their 26 clients. Someone pointed out 2 young divers had jumped in to swim off the bow, and the crew, assuming that they had missed them, adjusted the count to 26. With the swimmers on board, the Outer Edge headed back to the port. 2 days later, Jeffrey Nan, the boat's skipper, discovered Eileen and Tom's personal belongings in the Outer Edge's lost and property bin, including Tom's wallet, glasses, and clothes. Concerned, he called the owner of the Gone Walkabout hostel in Cairns, where the couple had been staying, to see if they had returned. They had not. A 5-day search began, which turned up no trace of Eileen and Tom. After more than 48 hours in the ocean, the couple may have drowned or been eaten by sharks. But as the chilling story broke, other theories emerged. One is that they committed suicide. Journals in their hotel room hinted at personal troubles. But the couple were devout Catholics with good prospects. Tom and Eileen had just come off 3-year tour of duty with the Peace Corps in Tuvalu and Fiji, and were en route to Hawaii, where they hoped to settle down. A diary entry by Tom Lonergan said he was ready to die, and one by Eileen just 9 days before the dive said Tom had a death wish and hoped for a quick and painless death. Now the question arises, why Tom wanted to die? Was someone threatening him? Another theory is that Lonergan's using the dive boat as a part of elaborate hoax to fake their deaths. Jeanette Brenthal, owner of the bookshop in Port Douglas, believes the couple came into her store on 27 January, 2 days after their dive trip. The pair was also reportedly sighted in a hotel in downtown Darwin. Reports of a boat less than a mile away from St. Crispin's Reef seem to support theories that couple was picked up. But the Lonergans' bank accounts were never touched, and no one ever collected on their insurance policies. A few weeks later, after they had gone missing, some of their personal dive gear washed up on the beach 75 miles from the dive site. Then, about 6 months later, a dive slate was found in the same vicinity as the gear, dated Monday, January 26 at 8 a.m. The message on the slate read, "To anyone, can help us. We have been abandoned on Agincourt by the MV Outer Edge. Please help us. To rescue us before we die. Help." However, this could not have been floated ashore, as it was demonstrated on a TV how the slate sank in a bucket of water. Evidence therefore suggested the slate had been planted to provide proof of the couple having been left at sea. The dive slate was even claimed to have been planted there by the American CIA agents. The diving fraternity was even skeptical the tablet was genuine, suggesting it was a part of elaborate disappearance hoax. In November 1999, Jeffrey Nan was tried on manslaughter charges and acquitted. His company, Outer Edge Dive, was tried by the civil court in Queensland, pled guilty to negligence and was fined. Nan, who closed down Outer Edge Dive shortly after, believes that the Lonergans died on the reef. Till date, no one knows what happened to them.